Now, I mentioned this is something that's extremely sad as well. More of a sad indictment on the state of the country that we live in. A man by the name of Samuel Rowe was recently arrested. A disgusting, heinous criminal that Samuel Rowe is, by armed police, right, for having the audacity in Starmer's Britain, with Rayner at the helm declaring war on allotments, to carry a bladed trowel in public, as well as a sheathed Japanese-made trowel in its sheath, mind you, bladed trowel in its sheath, as well as a peeling knife and a sickle, home from his allotment in Chorlton, Manchester. So, for those of you who, again, pretty much all of us know what knives are, right? Now, this is what they accosted Mr. Rowe with. I want you to have a look at this and think about it. When you see the bands often of foreign gangs walking around with huge knives, machetes. You see them all in Australia at the moment, and the Australian government's solution to this imported foreigner third world machete crime epidemic is to say, please put them in these boxes where they're going to be at the front of police stations. You're going to have amnesty for it, but also that's where the machetes are going to be stored. So if anybody is a gangster or criminal that wants a bunch of machetes for the next spree, you know exactly where to go and find them. Again, if they wanted to solve these problems, they would solve these problems. This is one of the things that caused a armed police response against Mr. Samuel Rowe. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a peeling knife. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There we are. This is a peeling knife. I want you to think about this, that this is what one of the things, as well as the sheathed sickle and trowel, that spawned a armed police response. Armed police response against a single, lone, 35-year-old theatre manager who was held for 12 hours. And then to add insult to injury, he was told when he was released he had to accept the caution. He had to accept the caution on, what was it? Where was it? A conditional caution. Oh, it still doesn't say. That still doesn't say, but he was given a conditional caution for carrying whatever the hell it was, carrying a weapon, supposedly, whatever the hell it was. I was just reading on into the article itself. It'll be linked down below if you want to go and read it. Because he couldn't have representation within the 12 hours because they couldn't find him a solicitor. Oh, yeah. About carrying bladed weapons in public. Now, do you remember, ladies and gentlemen, how many cautions and how many detainments at the hands of armed police were given to the band of Muslims that we covered before in the video, where the community liaison officer, not an armed police officer, the community liaison officer told the Muslims to disarm themselves at the mosque if they had any weapons? Do you know how many cautions were given? How many armed police turned up to force them up against the wall of their house and shove them in the back of a van? Yeah, that's right. None. But this is a 35-year-old theatre manager who's now worried this is potentially going to impact his job prospect, right? It's now going to impact his career because obviously this goes against your record, right? And now could be seen as potentially a danger to children or a danger to staff or whatever. Just because he was carrying gardening equipment home from his allotment. But obviously they want to terrify allotment owners now, don't they? Because they don't want anybody being able to grow their own food. Allotments are one of those very fleeting signs of that little bit of freedom that's left, because you have that little bit of self-sufficiency over, in many instances, the number one thing that you need, which is food. Food and water. Food, water, and shelter, right? Look at Maslow's, is it Maslow? In Maslow's hierarchy of needs? I think it's Maslow. But the three things you need more than anything, just simply for survival: food, water, and shelter, right? Food, water, and heat, food, water, and shelter. And the state want to take away the big one of those, which in many instances they're already taking away people's houses. We're seeing that with the forced compulsory purchase orders in Ireland and places like that we covered about 2 episodes ago or 3 episodes ago. And now we're seeing it with the food supply, where Rain has declared war on allotments because they don't want anybody being able to produce their own food. Because without being able to have a monopoly on the food supply, you can never really have full 100% control. You never really have full 100% control, because unless you have the ability to starve your political opponents to death, unless you have the power to do that because you have the monopoly on the food, there's always that capability that they will not fall in line, because they will know that they will still survive, right? But we're seeing everything being turned against people now. We're seeing police being turned against, particularly Christians, particularly British and Christians in particular. And now we're seeing the state turning on the number one thing, the very bedrock remaining of freedom, the very bedrock remaining of self-sufficiency, from the welfare state taking over, which is people growing their own food. People ensuring that without the state, they will still be able to survive. The state cannot have that. You cannot have full totalitarian control without that. So that's why they've now declared war on our farmers and our allotments. And I can't help but think this is just a matter of intimidation. I can't help but think this is just a matter of political intimidation. Because you can see somebody, a lone person walking home from an allotment in Chorlton, Manchester, a town that's had Islamic rape gangs for God knows how long, that still hasn't dealt with them, that still has these rapists walking around in the same streets as the people they raped, right? There's young girls that they raped, trafficked and tortured. And then you had armed officers. You've never had any armed officers for these rape dens, right? You have armed officers turning up outside the home of a lone manager, theatre manager, turning him around, pushing him up against his house, handcuffing him, throwing him in the back of a van. He said, they treated me like I had been doing harm to people. But they don't treat the people that actually do harm to people in this way. They don't treat the people that actually do harm to people in this way. Especially with the diversity, equity, and inclusion narratives, especially if they're from a foreign ethnic background. He was carrying, to give you a little bit of a descriptor of the situation, he was carrying a Japanese-made trowel in its sheath. I think we got an image. I think we've got an image of it. Yeah, here we go. So here's an example of one of the things, or the trowel that he had in his sheath. Ladies and gentlemen, here is an example of it. The Instagram post that is linked in the article. This is what he was arrested for. This is apparently now what classes as a bladed weapon or whatever that necessitates multiple armed police officers. He was also carrying a small Japanese gardener's sickle and a peeling knife, along with a trug of vegetables. He said the peeling knife was his late grandmother's, the sickle had been purchased a decade ago, and the trowel, whose short blade and which has a short blade and wooden handle, was a present. He added he had not been aware of any warnings about carrying the tools in public. However, since his arrest, a warning has appeared on the trowel manufacturer's website. Said customers need to familiarize themselves with offensive weapons law before carrying the tool in public. We strongly advise that you keep this tool concealed, sheathed, and out of sight in public places, preferably in a gardening bag or toolbox rather than on your belt. But this is just disgusting. You have gangs running about with machetes, right? It's done nothing. You have Muslims being told, because they got to be able to police their own communities now, because we've decided that we're going to become a society that decides to have parallel legal systems depending on your religion and your ethnicity and all of these things, right? That you got to discard your weapons at the mosque and all of this stuff, right? But a British man, a theatre manager, just carrying gardening equipment back home, gets armed police officers as a response. and gets treated as though they're a disgusting, murderous terrorist, right? This is truly disgusting. And then to make matters worse, you have to accept the caution because they couldn't find a solicitor for you in the 12 hours. They couldn't find a solicitor for you. Just adds insult to injury. John adds insult to many people's injury as well, ladies and gentlemen. Again, the political incompetence and the maliciousness that is on display with our political class, where they will do anything to not solve the problem, but make it look like they're trying to. Make it look like they're your friend and trying to help you, right? So on Oxford Street in London, to combat the epidemic of mobile phone theft, right, usually from Deliveroo or Uber Eats or whatever else other illegal immigrant occupying, delivery service that people use to get all mounds of shit just to their house because they're too lazy to make anything and they're even now too lazy to go out and get it, right? That they'll yoink it out of your hand as they're going past, right? And you'll never see that again. The criminal organizations that have turned, and the criminals that have turned what used to be historically a very safe and prosperous city into a disgusting third world rape reported every hour on average hellhole, Sadiq Khan says is the epitome of diversity and multiculturalism. They have now installed along pavements lines, much like you'd see on the edge of a train platform, where it says "mind the gap," right? Except this time it says "mind the grab." So you have this, for example, ladies and gentlemen. This is the enlightened London government's solution to mobile phone theft in London. Lines on there that say "mind the grab." As if these criminals are going to have, because they see a demarcation point of the pavement, they're going to be like, "Oh no, can't go up on there, it's a pavement." As if they're going to be so deterred by a purple line that they're going to think twice about nabbing a person's phone, which is still going to be in reach of them in many instances. They're only going to come slightly on the pavement, right? But this is what I mean. Taxpayer money was funded into this. Taxpayer money was funded into this scam, funneled into this scam. And it's all to make it look like they want to solve the problem. But in reality, they don't. In reality, they don't want to solve the problem. They're perfectly okay with it getting worse. They're perfectly okay with it being like this. Right? They want this to be completely normalized. And there's no deterrent, and there is not going to be any deterrent. Think about it. Imagine how much better a deterrent would be if were to steal something in this way, and you were to get slapped down with, I don't know, 20 years, something like that, with no possibility of parole or whatever. You'd soon see a lot of these instances stop. It's because there's no deterrence. There's no deterrence because we've become such a weak, pandering, you can't say anything about negative about anybody because you might risk offending them with hurty words and all of this stuff, because we've become so weak and so morally corrupted. Our morals have been completely inverted. We have no backbone anymore. These are solutions that we come up with. Well, it's not us that come up with them, obviously. But think about it. This is what happens when you give away every avenue to keep your political class accountable. This is why I've said so much before that this is the reason why Americans take the Second Amendment so seriously. A lot of Americans, anyway. Obviously not all of them. But a lot of the states you see in America where they have high gun control, you still see a lot of high gun crime. You still see a lot of crime of other instances. Look in New York City. Look at New York City, for example, the kind of hellscape that is. New York City and London, not so different. But you go to other places in America, certain areas of Texas are quite similar. But you had that cop, the iconic press conference that cop gave it, saying like, no, look, you know, if somebody's breaking into your property, you have the right to kill them. And in fact, we want you to do that. You know, you have the full right to defend, and you have our backing to defend your property. If anything, come down to the range, we'll give you some gun safety lessons, you know. But not only that, the Second Amendment, especially the greatest case for the Second Amendment you could make really is the Revolutionary War in America. And obviously that's why they take it so seriously, because it was in many ways the Second Amendment and them not giving over any guns or whatever to us, the British, that enabled them to win the wars. Without the arms, they wouldn't have been able to win the war, right? Obviously there's more other things in there. France was helping them out and all of this stuff, right? But, you know, ultimately it was them having guns that enabled them to fight back. And now, especially in Britain, when we decided that, oh no, we don't need our guns anymore, the government will keep us safe. And then you see that now you have mind the grab lines, but yet you have rape every hour reported in London. You have mobile phone theft at an all-time high. You still have gun crime. You still have gun crime because criminals will always have guns, right? Criminals will always have guns. All you've done is removed your way to fight back. It's like you've gone into a fight with somebody and you said, oh no, this is not cool. I need to tie one hand behind my back. Or Manny says, I need to tie both hands behind my back and tie one foot to the other. How do you think you're going to win? And who are the people that suffer for it? It's obviously not the politicians. Not the politicians, not the Prime Minister. It's not your MP. It's you. It's you. Because funnily enough, a welfare state, a totalitarian welfare state, for all the claims of it being safe, it's really, really not. It's really, really not. Another case of the police trying to focus on things that really don't matter when, as I said before, rape is reported in London every hour. You have knife crime out the wazoo. You have seemingly every single day, you know, gang warfare being videoed, and again, machetes and everything, fights in the street with weapons. Last night, I believe this was August 4th, sorry, 2 days ago, Tommy Robinson was detained on his way back from the country, on his way back into the country. So what happened was Tommy Robinson left the country after getting into a spat with somebody who, at least because now I believe he's been released on bail, his claims of self-defense do appear to be vindicated. He got into a spat with somebody, ended up knocking a guy out. The guy was allegedly drunk, and Tommy told him to leave him alone. Multiple times he wouldn't leave him alone. So again, what you're going to do is somebody's constantly in your face and they won't leave you alone. You're gonna take matters into your own hands, right? Quite literally. But he got brought back in. They tried to make the claim that he fled the country and tried to make him look guilty. But yet when he found out that, and again, I'm not saying this as a you know, rabid Tommy defender or anything like that. I see some people's criticisms about him, and I understand where a lot of them are coming from. I do believe on the whole he's trying to do good for this country. I believe on the whole he is, even if you disagree with the way he's going about it and some other things he supports. Obviously, you know, he's like a Zionist by his own admission, supports the state of Israel, you know, very ardently and stuff like that. So again, people criticize him for those political views and stuff like that. They accuse him of being Israel first and stuff like that, not UK first. I fully understand all that. Broadly, I think he's trying to do things that are good for this country, even if you disagree with the way he goes about it and you disagree with his status, with obviously how famous he is. And I know a lot of people who've organised local protests and stuff have actually asked him to stay away from their local protests purely because of the notoriety that he brings and stuff like that. So I understand that, you know, good for some things, not always good. I do think broadly he's trying to do good and he does care about this country. But when he was arrested, he came back into the country of his own volition when he was arrested. These are the things that he was arrested for. So he was arrested under Section 179 of the Online Safety Act, which says, without reasonable excuse, sent a message conveying information, there we go, known to be false intending at the time of sending the message, or the information in it to cause non-trivial or physical harm to a likely audience. Again, I'm interested to know how an online communication causes physical harm. But then also Section 127 of the Communications Act, which says a person is guilty of an offence if he A, sends a means sends by means of a public electronic communications network a message or other matter that is grossly offensive. Again, who gets to decide what grossly offensive means? Or of an indecent, obscene, or menacing character, or B, causes any such message or matter to be sent. So these are the kind of... Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, my door just moved and I thought somebody was coming in. Either that or I thought my room was haunted. This is the kind of stuff that we're talking about here. So this is a document which Tommy shared on his X page. It's an official document with Met Police, and... Oh, I press the wrong button. It says here, as you can see, exhibit number JF4 of his case, and it's a post from X. It's a post from X, and it says, fuck Palestine, fuck Hamas, fuck Islam. Want to protest? Fuck off to a Muslim country and protest. And it's on the back, it's on the front rather, of the Palestinian flag. So he's obviously expressing his views on like the pro-Palestine people, the pro-Palestine protests, all the rest of it, which many instances just in cases to spew outright Jew hatred. I don't like the term anti-Semitism anymore, not because I don't believe that it doesn't exist, but because it's become so politically charged, and people have tried to use it in for things that really aren't, things that could be considered anti-Semitic, usually just criticisms of the state of Israel and stuff like that. So, yeah, I don't like using that term, but a lot of people just use those protests to spew outright Jew hatred, like Mohammed Hijab, for example, who recently was brought in front of a court for the defamation case which he brought against Douglas Murray, which he lost, and that's very, very satisfying. Good to see. I believe David Atherton was also included. Maybe not in that case, but I believe he brought a case against David Atherton as well, which he also lost. But then another one, for example, is this one, where he points out that there's a school in London's East End called Kobe Nasrall Primary School, has been named as the first in the UK where none of the children's first language is English. It is a completely foreign school. It is a completely foreign school on English soil, and British soil, whichever term you want to use, and that is not good. That is replacement in action. It says here, the school sits in a quiet side street off the busy commercial road in Whitechapel, a district once synonymous with Jack the Ripper and the Cray twins and home to the nation's true Cockneys. Now this. So maybe they were trying to say, well, look, you gave out where the school was. That could cause somebody who's potentially a fanatic to go and do something at the school. Pardon me. Which, is understandable. It's a very politically charged environment we're in nowadays, obviously. But this is the thing. It's social media posts and things like that now are the worst crimes you could ever be charged with. Things against the religion of diversity, equity, inclusion, multiculturalism, all of this stuff, right? The leftist religion that has taken root in British society. Those are the worst things that you can do. To commit blasphemy against the new secularist religion, right? That is the worst thing that you can do. And pointing out these things would fall under that. But this is the case now where people are losing all respect for the police. They're losing all respect for law and order. Our cities are descending into chaos. All of our communities are descending into chaos. Politicians want to facilitate more of it because they see political gain through it. And very, very sadly, one of the things we are seeing, as I mentioned before, I don't like the term anti-Semitism, but we are seeing a very disconcerting uptick in Jew hate in particular, particularly on the streets of the UK, with the large Muslim population that we have imported, which obviously have religious reasons to hate the Jews and hate the Christians and stuff like that. But we also have just people going out and just targeting Jews seemingly for no reason, just because they're Jewish. So we have two gentlemen here coming up in this next clip. One of them is by the name of Kamil Galanti. I'm not sure who the other one is. He's a Polish guy, this Kamil is, and he says he's Jesus first, right? But they're going around and it seems to be something relatively harmless, maybe just causing a nuisance. But again, when it's done for religious and ethnic reasons in this way, again, that brings up, again, memories from history, all of these things, right? And is indicative potentially of the spread of not so good ideologies and outlooks, should we say. And again, I'm not saying this is a person that's only saying the problems with the UK now should be mentioned because it's affecting the Jews and stuff like that, which other nationalists are saying, right? Some people are only coming out and saying a lot of the dangers that people have been speaking about for years, purely now because it's affecting them, right? Because it's affecting them now, they're saying things about it when they didn't care about it, when it was, you know, young British girls being raped and all stuff like that, when it was people being priced out of houses, people being jobs taken away, school placements taken away, you know, schools are being taken over by foreigners in many instances, in many places, and they were told that if they objected to it, they were just racist and Islamophobic and, you know, objecting to diversity, and diversity is this good thing for whatever reason that we can't quite say. People who were saying that at the time, like, you know, a good example about the rape gangs, for example, is the EDL. They were saying it at a time when it was very, very unpopular to do so. BNP and people like that as well were saying similar things, whether you agree with them or not. A lot of people have since come around to similar ways of thinking, but they've only come around when it started affecting them. Those people should be viewed with scrutiny, absolutely. But it's okay then to say that the problems we're seeing, that people such as Jews, for example, are being targeted for this reason. And again, I'm somebody that says it as, for example, I don't believe we should have certain religions in the UK, such as Islam, okay? Again, you don't have something like Christianity, which has been, you know, possibly the best thing that's ever happened to the world, right? The spread of Christianity has been the best thing that's ever happened to the world. You know, you don't have Christianity without Judaism. That's obviously true because Christ comes and fulfills the Old Testament prophecies, and the Jews chose to reject him. You know, if they're true Jew and they reject the New Testament, they reject Christ, for example, that's where the difference comes, right? And that's where the conflict often comes. But you don't have Christianity without Judaism. Islam is then something, as far as I know, is completely different. I've seen Michael Knowles talk about the origins of Islam, for example. He says he thinks it's, you know, Muhammad meets an Nestorian heretic, and that's how Islam gets started. But either way, Islam is completely distinct. And obviously, it says that don't make friends with the Jews and Christians, right? Because they are friends unto themselves, or they are friends amongst themselves. Don't be friends with them. So it's an ideology that is imperialistic, it is colonizing, it is spreading, and it's spread by the sword. It's spread by the sword or by the gun in many instances now, and it brings a lot of terror in its wake. That's what we saw with the ethno-religiously motivated rape gang. So as far as I'm concerned, the ideology itself and the people that follow it do not belong in the British Isles, do not belong in Europe, do not belong anywhere. Okay, the ideology does not belong anywhere on this planet, in my opinion, because it's an evil ideology. And you can say that about whatever ideology that you want. We might disagree on it, but then when you see things like this, it is, you know, not nice to see, at least in my opinion. So this is two guys going around in a car and spraying Jews, and my initial thought with this was that it's only water, it's a water pistol, come on now, let's not, you know, let's not make a mountain out of a molehill in this instance. But the thing is, you can think is like, is it actually water? Could it be urine? Could it be something else? Could it be mixed with excrement? Could there be something in there that is meant to cause these people harm? And then you think the two people documenting this and videoing it and putting it on the internet, not exactly very smart. But yeah, I hope that this is dealt with purely because this is not something that should be happening in the UK. I'm going to turn the music off. So you can see here, they're driving off in the car. They're spraying quite clearly people who are Orthodox Jews with water pistols, right? Out the window. So this is Camille, I believe. This is Camille. And again, it's just not something that should be happening. You wouldn't like it if this was just done out of your window anyway. If anybody was walking past down this out of your window, you're walking down the street with your kid, you wouldn't like it, right? You wouldn't like it. At the end of the day, it's just water, but you don't know. Not everybody is sane of mind and thinks that this is a joke, you know. You don't know what's mixed in. You don't know what's potentially mixed in with that. So again, I do hope that it is dealt with. I do hope that it is dealt with. And again, I'm not saying that it's just because now it's affecting the Jews. We need to talk about these problems. We should be talking about these problems for how it's affected all of us.